It is time to get to the fourth Major Arcana Tarot card archetype, and we're starting with a bust of Nefertiti from Egypt. This work is from around 1300 BC. How amazing is that? And it shows the fascination with the female half of a ruling pair, which is what this card, numbered 3, but actually the fourth Major Arcana, taps into. The ancient world, in more than one place and time, was very hierarchical. Here you can see an example of that from Europe, and as I've talked about before, the early part of the Tarot Major Arcana sequence understands that and deals with what's called the ranks of man, although it means humanity, and that's why there's an empress and a papis. And unlike in that last image, what you'd often get towards the top of the hierarchy is this. You'd get the male ruler and female ruler. Here is the emperor and empress of Java. And even though the emperor was the one in charge in a kind of patriarchal old world, I would say there was an equal fascination with the empress in these times. Here's the Empress of Ethiopia. How great is that image? And she was described as a woman, quote, without malice, end quote. But there's definitely a dual aspect to the Tarot Empress because an empress can be a ruler herself, right? Can be the top of the food chain herself. So here, of course, is the Rider-Waite-Smith version of this card. And you can see her there seated, right, in power. And that power is temporal. It's earthly, right? The card that came before this, the Papis, the Holy Woman, is kind of a female ruler of the spirit. Here's the older, more traditional Marseille version of the same card, and you can see that the modern standard, which we just saw, doesn't veer too far from it. So the Empress herself has a dual aspect, but in a way, the two cards, 2 and 3 in the sequence of the Major Arcana, can be the dual aspects of a woman as well, right? Her spiritual and her earthly side. Here's the version from Aleister Crowley's tarot, so pretty consistent image. But back to the dual aspects, it's interesting because you have woman fragmented in that way, and then man the same way with the Emperor and Pope cards. And of course, those two sets of 2 are all side by side in the tarot sequence. Here's a representation of the Emperor and Empress of Japan. So, the card has definitely been associated with a powerful female figure. That makes obvious sense. And she can be that just completely in her own right? Just considered solely, or as part of a pair like this, or as part of the pair that we talked about with the spiritual versus temporal aspects. Speaking of being considered solely, here's a painting of Cleopatra. It has that sultry aspect that she's been associated with so much, and probably at the loss of the real story. She's a really fascinating character and an intelligent woman. Let's jump all the way from ancient Egypt to Victorian England, and of course it was called Victorian because of Queen Victoria, seen here. And, the Empress card can have a mother aspect to it when people use it for interpretation. What woman rules your life more than any other overall? It'd be your mother, of course. One way that modern interpreters use the card a lot is as a mother goddess figure, and they'll even postulate that the card was, a veiled reference to that kind of archetype. Well, there's just no evidence of that whatsoever, so we're sticking to the reality here. Here's Catherine the Great of Russia, another female ruler who was the sole leader of her country. So back to what I was saying a second ago, the Northern Italian Catholic card maker or makers who designed the original tarot, they didn't know who Isis was, or anything like that. Here, by the way, is the exact dress of Catherine the Great's that we saw in that painting. Pretty cool, huh? Here's my personal favorite, the Dowager Empress of China, Su Shi. Best I can do on pronunciation. But she ruled China for 47 years, started as a concubine, and ended up ruling the entire, kingdom empire. She was also in charge during the Boxer Rebellion, basically when the modern world came crashing into ancient China. Here's another good one, Urraca of Leon, who I believe took power in 1109, but she was kind of a rebellious figure. You should check her out. Refused to marry for a long time the king that they wanted her to marry, and then got away from him once she did. And here's one of the most famous empresses of all time. This is Josephine, of course, of Napoleon and Josephine. So notice her position, how she's seated in power, like we talked about, very similar to what we see on the Empress card. She's, of course, on the end of the spectrum where it's the more traditional ruling pair. She also was supposedly into divination, fortune-telling, that kind of thing, and used the services of the most famous fortune teller and tarot reader of all time, Madame Lenormand, who, of course, was a complete charlatan. Here's a ruling pair from Byzantium, and I don't think there's any doubt that's the kind of thing that was on the mind of the original card creator. And although I did laugh off the ancient Egypt Isis would-be connection, I do think the royal pairs on Earth were thought of as equivalent to the celestial versions, like Hera and Zeus here, in the pre-Christian era, of course. Well, let's finish up with the oldest surviving version of Major Arcana number 3. The archetype of the temporal female ruler, something we've seen many times throughout history, and was mostly thought of as part of a pair, but not exclusively, and that obviously keeps changing as time goes on, and we make more progress in terms of equality. Thanks.